Proverbs 13:24. Whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. No. Don't abuse kids in the name of discipline. If you turn the Bible for parenting tips, if you think this is wise, call us because the show is starting now. Welcome to Talk Heathen. Today is Sunday, June the 18th, 2023, and I am your host, Richard Gilliver. And joining me today is Dr. Ben. Ben, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm very happy to be here. And to go along with I've started a challenge for the audience because I'm a beverage goblin. I always have like multiple beverages on my desk during any of these shows. So I challenge people in the audience to try to guess how many I have on my desk today, because I noticed a thing where I'll pick up one and then drink out of it. And then like 2 minutes later, I'm picking up a different one and I'll pick up different ones throughout a show. So I guess maybe that's a fun little game if people want to play.
So when we're looking for numbers, does an array count as a specific number?
If one maybe was to say, I have to think about that.
An array of beverages.
An array of beverages. Yes. We have to determine the number that counts as an array, and I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, so Talk Heathen is a product of the atheist community of Austin. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we have open lines. So get your calls in at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. But as always, before we jump into calls, we like to do a little segment called Talk Heathen to Me. I always want to insert just before that, I always want to just go, and baby, talk heathen to me. Because it just feels natural. It just feels right. Before we get started, we're going to give you the results of last week's Talk Heathen to Me. And last week, we asked you complete the question, if God is so great, why doesn't it blank? So number 3 is Evans Colton. If God is so great, why doesn't it stop creating people that are only created to be tortured forever in hell? Ben, what do you think of that one?
That's a really good point.
Yeah, absolutely. There are different theological considerations to that one as well, which we could go into if we were all immensely boring like I am. Number 2 is Ada S., who says, if God is so great, why did he give up his place in heaven to the Hubble telescope and space trash? I like that one.
Well, but you see, he is beyond the space trash. You have to sift through the space trash to get to God. It's this whole process.
Is it hide and seek? Is he hiding within the space trash?
Maybe he's in the space trash. God of space trash.
God of space trash. And number 1 is Greg Trammell. If God is so great, why doesn't it create flying cats big enough to ride back and forth to work? Good question, and a very, very good question.
It seems like oversight on God's part, of all the things, all that time God spent creating things like cancer and other diseases. He could just be making, giant flying cats. That would be way better use of his time, I think.
It'd certainly be a consideration if I was God. Instead of making little fish that swim up at the end of your doodah, we could have flying cats to go to work on. I'm much in favour of that were I God, but I'm not. So the prompt for next week is what would you have ordered at the Last Supper and why? Enter your best answer below the video in the comments, and next week we will reveal the top 3 answers. But I want to ask Ben first, what would you have ordered at the Last Supper?
My answer is totally influenced by the picture behind Richard today. So we were talking backstage, and those are clearly on that platter Jesus is holding. It's clearly angel wings. So definitely, I would want to try some of these angel wings. After all, God created these angels with wings that can fall off or be pulled off, and then you can have an eternal supply of angel wings. And that just, that's heaven to me. So I think at the Last Supper, I would have to see if Jesus could provide me with angel wings. And then, you know, if this actually happened, if God could provide angel wings and we could verify that they were indeed angel wings, that might be some evidence that, you know, angels actually exist. So
do you think we could have an angel wing challenge like we have chicken wing challenges to see how many you can eat as well?
Oh yeah, definitely.
With different an array. That's going to be the word of the day. An array of hot sauces to dip them in or to pour on them. I think angel wings is the way forward. I was thinking about this question myself, and I kind of went for something different. I didn't go for the food option. I actually thought a nice little jazz quartet or something in there. Or a string quartet, something, you know, there's the Last Supper, the mood's going to be a bit down. Let's get a bit of music in there, liven it up a little bit. Let's get a bit of swing going and, you know, make that Last Supper a little bit of more of a party than everyone being a bit down because Jesus is going to get crucified and all that.
Well, I mean, was it really that much of a downer of a supper? That, like, I mean, imagine, like, think of the things that Jesus put his disciples through. I mean, I get that, like, they were supposedly friends, but we're only hearing this story from one side of the equation, right? Like, we don't actually know what the disciples thought of Jesus. But if you imagine any of your friends doing what Jesus did, like basically entering this whole friend group and then just bossing you around constantly, telling you what to do with your stuff, what to do with your body, telling you like you can't like go masturbate in the evening. Like if my friends started telling me what I could and could not do with myself, I'm like, that's kind of a shitty friend. Like maybe I'm not saying this for sure. I'm not any of the disciples, but maybe they were happy to get rid of him. Maybe they were just trying to be polite for a little while. And then we're like, it's time. We can't do this anymore.
He's gone. Yes. Yes. You see, he's on that hill. He's on that cross on that hill. And we're all free now. We can do what we want. We're not going to get bossed into eating angel's wing for the Last Supper anymore. Ben, shall we take a call instead of just rambling on?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Then do you want any of your fancy in particular?
Oh, I think you and I both want to take a specific call.
Okay, I'll bring up Guru Ram Gopal. Guru was someone who responded to one of our YouTube videos, and I kind of got on there and asked him if he'd be willing to call in, and he has done, and I'm very appreciative of that. Guru, how are you? What would you like to talk about?
Well, we could speak about the existence of God.
That's a very good subject for this show. Let's go with that one. Why do you think God exists?
Why do I think that God exists? Because without God, we couldn't exist. This universe could not exist.
Why?
Why? Because this universe needs a creator. There cannot be anything with order and design which doesn't have a creator.
Does a creator need to be a living thing?
Well, yes, of course, because
Why?
in real life we experience that whenever an object is created, especially with the order and design, it should have a creator who is a living person.
So I don't know if you understand that your argument is kind of going in a circle, and I don't know if you noticed that. So your claim is that God exists, and so we ask you, why do you believe God exists? And you say, because, well, we wouldn't be around if God didn't exist. It's like, okay, so but how do you know that? Well, because there has to be a creator. Okay, so then why is there a creator? Because humans exist and we couldn't exist without a creator. Do you see there's nothing in there that actually backs up the claim? It's just a circle. Do you have anything that tells us like why we need a living being that created everything that happened? Why is that the answer and not some natural process?
Okay, for example, can you give me an example where something is some object, especially a complex object, is created without a living entity? Can you give me an example? For example, food. For example, food. Right? Food. If we see a plate of food, that means that there is some cook or some person who created the food. Food cannot exist without a cook.
Except that it can actually. Hey, what about food that you don't need to cook?
Food that you don't need to cook. I'm speaking about prepared food. I'm not speaking about fruits here. I'm not speaking about fruits.
But your statement is false, though, right? Because like some food is prepared, we know that, but some food is not prepared. And so where you're limiting your definitions to things
food,
that
right? Because we are
right. So the argument right now, you phrased it to work in your favor while ignoring examples outside of your specific way of thinking about it, right? Like I just pointed out an example that goes against your line of reasoning, right? So that should tell you, hey, maybe I need to change my argument a little bit, or I need to answer to this particular hole in my argument.
Well, first of all, English is not my first language. Another thing, in India, what we call food, so generally it means something prepared, right? If fruits,
right, but
even if we have fruits for food, we will at least cut them, right? We would.
But here's the problem. Here's the problem. Your argument then is the food that is prepared has to have been prepared. I'm not going to disagree with you there because you've already started with a definition of this is prepared, right? You've limited your definition already to be within the confines of what you want it to be.
And I think that's what sometimes what happens in with these arguments, and I don't know if you're doing this specifically, but kind of when these arguments come up, when people are talking about the universe or people being created, they use it in the context of created with a creator. Now, rather than using the word created, why don't we just say come into existence? So the universe and people have come into existence. So what is the cause of why does that need a creator? Because if you're starting with the premise creation needs a creator, you've kind of already poisoned the well, if you like. You're already saying we need a creator because it is a creation, and a creation by definition needs a creator. So rather than saying creation, why don't we say the universe or people have come into existence? Now, does coming into existence require a creator? Because that changes the whole emphasis of the argument. And you can't just simply refer then to, well, food. My definition of food is something that has been prepared, and because it has been prepared, there must necessarily be somebody who has prepared it. Because I agree with you, but as Ben was saying, food in general, as a general term, doesn't have to be prepared. So you're narrowing the scope of the question to fit the answer you want to fit in there. So rather than saying the people we created or the universe was created, let's say that that we have come into existence. Now, Guru, do you think that things that come into existence need a creator, and why?
Well, anything with order and design definitely should have a creator. Can you give me an example in this world?
Again, Gopal, you're saying the same thing. You're saying that things aren't necessarily designed, but we don't know that. How do you know that a rock is designed? How do you know that a tree is designed? You need to evidence that argument. You can't just assume that that's the case. So let's go back, take a step back again, and let's start with this thing has come into existence. Let's not use words like design or creator. Let's in fact evidence the argument that something that has come into existence needs to have had a creator. And simply saying, well, because it was designed is not the right answer. It's not an answer to that question. Because by being designed, you're implying a creator anyway. But the question isn't, we know the thing had a creator. How was it created? The question is, we don't know it had a creator. How do we say that it did have a creator? And that's a completely different question. So let's stick with that specific question and answer it in regards to that question, rather than automatically putting what we would say is poisoning the well by saying, well, it needs this, it needs a creator because it is created. Let's get rid of that whole line of argument and let's go down the route of something has come into existence. Why has it been created? Why do you think it needs necessarily a creator?
Okay. Richard, yes, yeah. Okay, Richard. So, for example, the microphone on which you are speaking, right? So, like, if we just think about it, how did it come into existence?
So here's the problem, though. Here's the problem. You keep picking examples of things that were made by people, right? Let's go with something that wasn't made by people. Let's go with like a rock or something like that. What made a rock?
Well, rock is a part of this creation, and that is what we are discussing. We are discussing whether this creation. Let me use what is the other word you want me about universe. Okay, universe. Okay.
So this
use the word universe.
So how do you know that a rock was part of this creation and was made by something that was living? How do you know that?
Because as I said, in this universe we can see a lot of order. Like, for example, now it's night in India, and tomorrow morning at what time the sun will rise, I can tell it now. And not only tomorrow morning, after 2 months, at what time the sun
there
will
are patterns,
rise, I can tell it now.
Right? There are patterns in this world, but that still doesn't tell us whether or not something was created. Like, think about all of the rocks outside, or think about like mountains, canyons, all of that. We know that we can watch natural processes act on these, right? We can see a river go through an area, and we can see over time the soil is washed away, the ground is moving, rocks are eroding. We can see this happening in real time, and none of that required human intervention, right? So there are certain things that we can say occurred naturally. What caused that natural process to happen, I don't know. I don't know what started the first river from flowing. I don't know what caused mountains to form initially, like what caused the physical laws to start occurring. I don't know that. But it's too much of a stretch to say we see this happening, therefore this is the same process as when a human creates a microphone or a human creates dinner, right? Do you see that there's differences here? Richard and I are just we're not ready to take that step to say that this is a living being made process, because we don't have evidence that suggests that is the only way it could have come about, right?
Yeah,
well,
and we've got these different.
The example that you are giving, could I speak now?
Yes, go ahead.
Richard?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what I'm saying is the example of rivers making certain patterns, right? That is a random design. But the example I gave, it is repeated, right? Every day the sun is rising at a particular time, and in advance we know it, right? Even after 6 months, what time the sun will rise, I can tell it now. So do you think if something is happening by random?
That still does not mean that there was living intervention. We know that there are certain physical laws that are at least observable in our universe. I don't know if those are the same in other universes. If there are other universes, I don't know that. But I do know that there appear to be patterns within our universe and in our solar system. And because these laws are happening, that's how we get these patterns that repeat over and over. But we do hypothesize, and we can guess with a pretty significant level of confidence that that's not always going to be the case. We've seen other stars explode. We've seen other planets like die, essentially. We see changes in our universe, and there's no guarantee that tomorrow our sun isn't going to be one of those exploding stars. We know, even we can predict that at some point in the future, our sun is going to no longer be, safe to be even this close to. We know that there's going to be variation at some point. We don't know when, we don't know necessarily how, but that's our prediction. And so to say that, yeah, we have confidence that the sun's going to rise again tomorrow, but there is still no guarantee about that. And we see in other solar systems cases where it stops doing that, right? So your example isn't even consistent with what we know about reality. I think you're existing in a very shallow view of what happens in our universe. And I think in order to maintain that view of having a living creator, you kind of have to live in that shallow mindset. Once you add these layers to it, it becomes harder and harder to accept those examples as evidence for really anything supernatural.
Well, I'm not getting your point, because you are saying the sun will destroy one day. So that does not, we are not speaking about the destruction. I am saying when it is existing, right? Why?
Right. So again, this is something that's bugging me about your arguments. So you'll make an example, and then I'll tell you why your example is flawed. I'll give you an exception to your example, and your response every single time has been, well, no, but if I just redefine my example to this thing that has less exceptions, then I'm right. Like, yeah, you can redefine everything all day, but it still doesn't make your original point true. And it just, certain things are more predictable in more narrow context, but that does not mean that your rule is correct.
Well, first of all, you are saying that you found some flaw in my example, but you are not pointing out your flaw. You are pointing out is that the sun will get destroyed one day, right? But I gave you the example of microphone. It will also get destroyed one day, right? So isn't that comparison valid?
Guru, I gave you examples of why your generalization is not entirely correct, and you have the option to, like, if you're going to be intellectually honest here, you're going to address the hole in your point. You're going to tell me why that hole doesn't matter, besides just redefining your terms. That's running away from the point. You've run away from the point instead of addressing that actual exception.
Well, I still don't understand what is the exception. Are you speaking about the destruction of sun exception? Everything gets destroyed at some point, isn't it?
Your argument, your initial argument, Guru, your initial argument was that the sun rises in the morning and sets in the evening, and then that's a predictable pattern. And since the pattern is predictable, that's indicative of a creator. And I just pointed out that pattern doesn't have to exist and won't always exist. And there's no guarantee that pattern is going to
exist. What is going to exist always? Can you give me an example of something which will always exist?
Okay, so Guru.
Richard, jump in.
There's I think there's something,
you're not getting
Guru,
comparing.
Just hang on one second. Guru, just hang on one second.
Okay.
I think there's kind of a fundamental problem with what you're saying, because you're saying there are patterns. And Ben's agreeing that there are patterns in nature. But what you're saying is those patterns are evidence of creation. Now, what we're saying is that's not the case. What they are is actual examples of determinism. These things have been set into process and have laws which govern them. And therefore, they are going to happen. But that doesn't require a creator. And you've kind of offset that. You offset that earlier on in the conversation by saying it's either a creator or it's random chance. Now, we're not saying it's random chance. We're not saying it. That's not an option for us. There is determinism. Things have occurred, something has happened, and via the laws of the universe, it will happen in X way. So therefore, it's going to happen this way. And it might have a pattern about it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there is a creator behind it. And that's the problem with your argument. You're looking at it and you're seeing pattern, therefore creator. But there are more options than that. Not everything that has a pattern has to have a creator. We can, yes, you're correct. Okay. We can trace the movement of the planets and the stars in the sky, but that doesn't mean that there's necessarily a creator behind them. But we can do it. And in fact, if we have a look at the people, Guru, if we have a look at the people who actually study these things professionally, when they're writing their scientific papers about the movement of the stars and the planets, nobody invokes a god as to the creator, and that's why they do it. They point to these laws that we have. these laws of the universe which govern these things. And that doesn't necessitate a God. So the kind of challenge you've got is to show us where a God is necessary in this whole picture, which you've not done yet.
Okay, so you are saying that the pattern that we see in this universe of the sun rising and setting at a fixed time, right? That does not require a creator. Can you give me an example in this world of something which is like we were discussing about the microphone with which you are speaking. What do you think? That microphone doesn't need a creator? Do you think it came into existence by
you're going
some
back to this flawed argument again? We don't need to use a microphone. Let's use something like a rock. Let's use a particular rock, a particular natural stone that we're walking by on the ground and we see and we pick up. Why does that rock need a creator? We don't need to talk about something we know has a creator, like a microphone.
See, you are giving examples from nature, right? But I am saying that that is the point we are discussing, that who created nature. So you cannot give me an example from nature.
So you have to demonstrate that there is a creator. Okay, so if we're talking, you've just literally defeated your own argument. If we're talking about a microphone, right, I can take you with suitable knowledge of microphones. I can take you to the microphone manufacturer and show you exactly who created that microphone, exactly what methodologies they used, exactly what technology they used for it. All you're saying to me is, there is a rock, it was created. You're not doing any of this other stuff that we can do with a microphone, with a car, with a light, with any piece of technology, with a watch, with anything. We can do all with man-made things. We can point to specifically, with suitable knowledge, we can point specifically to who made it, exactly what methods they used, exactly what materials they used, and exactly what tools they used, amongst other things. But when it comes to this rock, you're just assuming this was created, but you can't do any of that other stuff. So this is the problem you're having. Where in this rock is the evidence of creation other than you simply saying it was created? Because that's not evidence. That's just a statement. It's a belief. So where in this rock is the evidence of created? Where's the hallmark, like we'd get on a piece of jewelry to say where it was made and what year? Where is that in the rock that we find?
Well, again, the rock is a part of this universe. And I would say that just because we cannot see, of course, first of all, the scriptures give the exact personality who created this universe, how God created the universe, all the details are given in the scripture, right? So we have to do more research on it.
But if we're gonna that's probably gonna be content for a whole separate call, because I'd love to go with you there on, like, as you're saying that the scriptures give a personality for the specific God that did this, but there are so many religions out there that disagree on their God's personality. So which God are we talking about, and why is it yours and not any?
There is only one God. Well, there is only one God according to all major religions. There is only one God, isn't it?
All those gods are
so that one
same.
God.
All of those gods are the same.
What's that?
That's not true, though, is it? Because not all major religions believe in only one God,
and their gods are very, very different.
And even within Hinduism, you've got. I was talking pre-show when I did the pre-show TikTok. There was someone in the comments who said that they were an atheist Hindu. So not even all Hindus believe in God. So even within your own tradition, your own religion, sorry, not tradition, within your own religion as a group, there are people who don't believe in any gods, and there are also people who believe in multiple gods within that religion. So the statement's not only false for religion as a whole, but it's also false within your own religion. So we need to kind of dig. I think this is a thing for another call, because we've done the thing. We've got to the point of, well, the evidence is in the scriptures. So I think what we should do is you should go away, look up that evidence within the scriptures, and give us a call back next week, or maybe if you want to speak to one of us particularly next time we're on, and go have that next conversation, that next step of that conversation, where we can kind of dig specifically
in the scriptures and tell you who created the world. That is what you want me to look it up in the scriptures?
No, the evidence for that God, the attributes of that God, and why it demonstrates that God created the world.
Why it demonstrates that God created the world. There is a reason why He created the world that is given in our
Okay,
scriptures.
so
You want that
we'll go through that on the next call. So I'm going to let you go,
Okay.
Guru. I
So if you
appreciate
want to
your
end
call.
that conversation, it's up to you.
Yeah, we'll end it now and give us a call back next time me and Ben are on. And, have a look out and keep your eye on it. Subscribe to the channel and you'll be able to see when me and Ben are next on together. I do appreciate the call. Me and Ben have both been, we knew that call was coming and we've both been looking forward to it quite a lot. So I'm going to read a couple of super chats out. First one we've got is from Amit Matthew for $5. Our friend Ami says, having personally interacted with Hindu apologetics, they're highly overrated. I think the people watching can make their own mind up about that. And Dean Meadows also sends $5 and says, asks, what is the weakest part of your own personal worldview? So for me, Christian, it would be the problem of evil. What is yours? Ben, I'll throw that to you first.
Oh, this is a hard topic. I think it's hard because I don't take strong positions on a lot of things. But I guess maybe arguably a weak point about that is with that kind of framework, you really can't reach a position of confidence with a lot of things. So I guess that's probably the biggest one.
Yeah, I kind of agree entirely with that. First of all, I don't even know that I have a worldview. I'm not even confident that I have enough kind of knowledge to say that I agree with this, and this. But mine is the same thing. There are things in it that are kind of, we can't say for definite. And, and I think that's exciting. I don't think that's a flaw. Personally, I mean, I'm personally interested in cosmology. I have no expertise in it. I'm just enjoy reading about it and things. And when things like new advances around the black holes come out and new information about black holes come out, which threw into question what we knew before or what we believed before, I actually think that's a good thing. So although it may be a weakness in the part that it doesn't tell us that it's definitively true, I actually think it's really exciting. But yeah, I think me and Ben both agree on that. So, okay, we have some exciting news. Get ready for an extraordinary experience at the annual Back Cruise on Saturday, August 26th, 2023. Join the atheist community of Austin for a fun summer evening on the water, conversing with like-minded freethinkers. Meet Forrest, Valkai, J-Mike, and other hosts of the Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, and the non-profits. They'll be on board to mingle and chat throughout the 2-hour cruise around Ladybird Lake. The cruise will pause at the Congress Avenue Bridge at sundown for the emergence of the world's largest urban bat colony. Get your tickets now at tiny.cc/backcruise. I wish I could go to that. Unfortunately, I am not able to make that. So I'm 5,000 miles away.
Yeah, I cannot either. I went last year though, and it was a great time. So I recommend everybody, if you're able to go, it's a fantastic time. I really wish I could make it this year, but I'm working, so I won't be able to. But
I think anybody who gets the opportunity to go should go to that. There are also ways to support Talk Heathen and the ACA. So you can get a new limited edition t-shirt. Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Voltaire. You can visit tiny.cc/merchaca to get that and other merchandise now. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel, enable notifications, and comment below on your favorite caller. The last caller made a comment, and that's why he ended up calling in, because we interacted with him there. I will personally be looking at all of those comments. So if you've got anything to say, please communicate that in the comments below. You can become a channel member. Click the join button below the video, where you can get custom chat emotes, and you will help perpetuate the mission of Talk Heathen and the atheist community of Austin. And finally, you can send a super chat with a question or comment, as we've just read out, and we will read as many as we can. I think we're going to take another call. Ben, what are you fancying? Shall we take Chris?
Yeah, let's go for it. We have a lot of really good topics today, and I'm very excited to get into these.
Absolutely. Chris,
Hello.
you are calling from West Virginia.
Yes. Excuse me if my Wi-Fi cuts out. We don't get good internet around here.
No problem. No problem. We'll see. We'll do the best we can with you. So you want to talk about destiny and free will coexisting?
Yes, and this is, more of a theological argument, and, you can still agree with it and be atheist, obviously, but this is more about, a lot of atheists I hear like to say that, God must be evil for allowing the evils of man. So this is kind of an argument to disprove just that part of it. But it's very scientific in the way I've built it up. So let's start by, have you guys read anything on, Stephen Hawking's view of free will or, Einstein's theories of relativity? You're aware, you know about these things somewhat?
I've not read anything to do with Stephen Hawking's views on free will. I know a little bit about the theory of relativity, but as I said earlier, I'm not an expert on such matters.
Well, Stephen Hawking in The Grand Design talks about how, since when the Big Bang happened, every particle in the universe was put into motion. Basically, all the future was decided then. You know what I mean? This first force put every particle into motion. And since humans are essentially biological machines, if you were capable of understanding every single aspect of the universe and how every particle behaves in quantum mechanics, you could essentially predict the future, right? Is that an acceptable argument?
Yeah, that's one version of free will. Yeah, of determinism, deterministic free will. Sorry, I'm getting all confused.
Hello?
Please carry on.
Sorry, you cut out for a second.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's an idea called deterministic free will, or determinism. There are slightly different examples of that.
Yeah, well, and part of, this basically tells us that we don't have free will since, if our destiny was decided at the beginning of the universe, then how were we able to make the choices, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, space-time relativity, and this is kind of a philosophical part. Obviously, nobody can prove this, but relativity tells us that the past and the future exist and are real as much as the present, right? Like essentially from an outsider's perspective of the universe, all things are happening at once. Can we agree on that?
What do you mean by all things are happening at once? I was kind of following you until you said all things are happening at once.
Well, essentially, sort of if you can exist outside of space-time, then you don't have this view that we have of linear time, right? Like,
I don't know how it's possible to exist outside of space-time.
Well, no.
How is that even a possibility?
I'm saying if you didn't have our perception of time, right?
The difficulty with this is that we're talking about relativity and saying that every point leading to the next point is relative to the next point on, which I agree with you about. But then we don't know that if we are outside of that whole picture, we would see something different because we don't have an example of that. All we have is this relative idea. So how can we even kind of get that forward as even a perceptible thing, because it's so alien to what we actually think the universe is doing anyway, and our perspective within it.
Well, yeah, that's my point. Like we can't have this perception of time, but relativity tells us that is the way the universe works, right? That's why it was so controversial when it first came up, because people, it seemed like such a foreign idea.
It did compared to the ideas around when Einstein proposed it, yeah. But that's not to say that it's kind of wrong. Anyway, it seems to have been confirmed by everything we've done so far. So I'm failing to see kind of,
Well, the point.
What's the kind of? Yeah, okay. Let's get to the point. Let's get to the point rather than kind of.
Okay, if the future existed at the moment of the Big Bang, then we existed at the moment of the Big Bang. And
That's not what determinism meant,
and
though.
It's not that we don't get to make the choices. It's that we only have one choice we can make.
Okay, Chris, I'm going to let Ben take this because he wants to jump in and have been talking for a while.
Well, because no, I'm not going to grant you that. Also, like, it sounds like you're setting up a nice little argument for determinism. And I know it seemed from your question in the call screening was talking about relating this somehow to free will and how these can coexist. I'm failing to see where you're making that bridge, and maybe I just need to let you communicate it. But it sounds like so far we have a lot of theory going on. And here's my issue for how we're setting this up.
Well, the theory of relativity.
Yeah, no, and here's the thing. Like, a lot of this theory, there's a lot of things that we can mentally masturbate about and come to different hypotheses of what's going on and what we think could be possibilities. But there's a huge issue when we take these and then try to extrapolate that out to what is happening in reality with kind of more mundane science. Like, because there's so many different theoretical ideas out there, and I think it's such a stretch to try to, and number one, also going with the fact that we all exist in this inside space-time reality that we're working with. And so having to bring in all this stuff, like, but what if there are things outside of space-time? I don't know how relevant that is to whether or not Richard and I have free will here today, or if we're determined to do whatever we're going to do. How does this apply to where we're going with this conversation?
I don't know if you're misunderstanding it. I'm not the example of someone existing outside of space-time was just to get you to understand our perceptions limited. That's not any crux of my argument in any way.
Can I jump in just one sec, Chris, and I'll let you speak in a minute. I just want to kind of jump in one quick second, because you're kind of the notes we've got on your call are destiny and free will can coexist. Now, I'm not quite sure what you mean by destiny, but if we're talking about determinism, I don't necessarily have a problem with determinism. There's an actual thing called deterministic free will, which says that, everything is kind of predestined, if you like, from things that went before it, but we still have the ability, or the illusion of the ability, to make decisions. So therefore we can still be held morally responsible for etc. Now, out of all the theories of free will, I actually lean quite a lot towards that one. I don't have a definitive there's not one particular kind of theory of free will that I lean towards over another definitively. It's like we were saying with the super chat question earlier, regarding worldviews. This is one of those things I don't have a definitive answer for. I kind of go on a couple of different of the theories. I kind of slide between them. But I think deterministic free will is a thing. Now, if you're saying, when you're speaking about destiny and free will coexisting, that there is a thing called deterministic free will, then and all that implies from the kind of metaphysical aspect, I kind of agree with you. I don't really have an argument with you. We could talk about the nitty gritty, about the finer points, but I don't necessarily disagree. The kind of the thing I've got in my head where I might disagree with you is by using the word destiny, you're implying something other than determinism. And I think that's the kind of area I want to go down with you.
Too.
Well,
the point is, though, if you can accept this, right, that humans have free will, then God is not responsible for the atrocities of mankind. Right?
Yeah, see, this is where I was starting to have a problem with it, because you're taking this and then you're applying it to the problem of evil, which this is where we get into some sticky places. I'll let you kind of continue your point about exactly the claim that you're making.
Okay, well, another example of this, like, all right, basically, if we could travel back in time, right, which obviously we can't do that, we may never be able to, but if you could go back in time and for some reason your memory was wiped, right, and you went back to that point not knowing you were in the future and not knowing what would happen, you would always make that same decision. And this is predictable, but you still made the decision. Given everything that you knew about the world and everything that had happened to you and all the circumstances you're in, you will always make that same decision. So the point is that someone else didn't make the decision for us. It just seems like we don't have free will because we can only ever make the decision once. We can't go back and change things.
That's what determinism means. But
that we have.
Here's the thing with this.
I'm agreeing. This is determinism. I mean, you can... call it that if you want to, but that's what, if this is acceptable, then we can't blame God for the atrocities that man committed.
I disagree, though, with that, because I think there's some cases where some actions could come from humans that they had no choice in the biological factors leading up to it. Like, for example, I use the examples of antisocial personality disorder a lot. And we don't know a lot about what causes somebody to be predisposed to have an antisocial personality disorder. But like, if everything in the universe led up to somebody being born with a psychological abnormality that then would give them a conduct disorder and then an antisocial personality disorder in adulthood, like those things that led up to that were not chosen by that person. And if their brain works in a different way, and if God is the one that made their brain to work in a certain way, how are we going to hold that person responsible for not having the same moral compass that other people would have because of different brain chemistry?
So you're arguing that people with personality disorders have no free will?
Not all personality disorders. I'm citing a very specific personality disorder. Well, people do not.
Well, okay,
do you understand?
I have a schizophrenic brother.
No, Chris.
I have a schizophrenic brother. And yes, his actions are governed by his brain.
Chris,
and
are you listening to me? Chris, do you know what an antisocial personality disorder is?
I mean, I haven't studied it, but yes, I can understand it just from...
What's the criteria? What is involved with that pathology? What is this disorder?
Is that relevant to the person's ability to make decisions?
Yes.
If they're not making their own decisions, then you're saying they're not making their own decisions, right?
It is relevant because if somebody...
Well, no, answer my question, please. If they're not...
I am answering your question. Chris, I'm going to mute you. I'm going to mute you, okay? All right, you're going to listen to me. I'm answering your question because you've demonstrated that you don't know what this personality disorder entails, so I'm going to let you know. What we see with these people is they don't have the brain chemistry necessary to feel guilt about things that they do to other people. They don't understand moral consequences. And so that's why you end up having these people that end up in the system for things that they didn't know. They might know that they weren't supposed to do certain things because of consequences, but otherwise they cannot process how their decisions impact other people. So if you have somebody like that where their brain sets them up for failure, essentially, you're saying that that person has complete liability and they should have had the ability to make that decision, which, like, yeah, I will grant that they made a decision to do the thing that they did, but they're entering this with a completely different way of looking at it, to where they don't get the same biological feedback that a lot of us would. And so this is a case when we're looking at people like this in society, it's very difficult for us to say, what is the right course of action here? Because, like, you can end up going to very severe punishments for these people. But if you really think about this person may not have had the ability to actually think through what is happening. And should we hold them to that same standard, or should we find a better way to help them integrate with a society that wasn't built for them? And so it's an issue where there are a lot of exceptions and things where I don't know if we can overcome this gray area. There's a lot of gray here. And I'm going to unmute you and I'm going to let you address that. But does that kind of make sense? Like why I'm less likely to go with you?
Oh, well, no, I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying. And okay, can we accept this theory if we eliminate people with, you know, some kind of biological impairment, right?
No,
If
we can't. We can't. No, we can't grant you that because you are. I hate the word eliminate, especially for this kind of thing. It sounds very eugenics-y. But if you just take away the exceptions, if you take away actual humans that are the exception, this is the exact same argument we had with the last caller. If you just take away the exceptions and your argument works, it still tells me that your argument doesn't work because you had to remove a percentage of real people in order to make your argument
most
work.
I think most religious people would
Except
grant
that
you
they
that,
don't.
you know.
Does God? Okay. Does God have a different?
I didn't finish what I was saying.
No. Does God have a different standard for people with differences in brain chemistry, or are they held to the same standard as other people? Like, what if God predisposed somebody to end up in a society that's going to treat them as less than because of certain biological differences, and to where they're going to be held responsible for things that they cannot comprehend? Is that the person's fault, or is that maybe God's fault for making that a biological reality?
That, you know, I personally don't think God would condemn someone for, I mean, the ways that they think or what they might do because of a certain biological, you know, I don't want to say defect, but, you know, something like that. But what I'm trying to get across here is that, I mean, all of these things are circumstances that led this person's decision.
Okay, so can I ask you, Chris, are you a proponent of determinism, or are you a proponent of libertarian free will?
I would say more determinism based on my scientific beliefs, but that's what I'm saying. The more I delve into science, the more it seems that free will is possible, even if we have a predetermined. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That is a position. That's a legitimate position. I'm just asking you that. So, if God created things the way He did, knowing that these things were going to happen, and knowing people kind of, and I'm not sure about the nuance of what you mean about people being able to make these decisions. So let's
the ability to make decisions. Just they're limited on, you know, their capability of making them logically, in a way. That's kind of
so. If that's the case, and God created people this way, knowing people this way, does He then have the right? And in your view, because obviously I'm talking to you and not a bunch of other theists, but does He then have the right, in your view, to kind of punish people if you believe that He punishes people by sending them to hell? Does He have the right to do that if they were kind of inevitably going to make... You don't follow that idea?
No, hell does not exist in the, ancient text of the Bible. The word hell...
No, I agree with you. I agree.
Viking mythology, and the translations of hell in the Bible can just be, you know, considered as an afterlife, or...
So do you think they're rewarded by going...
Huh?
This is taking a whole new twist. Do you think they're rewarded by going to heaven then, if they do the right thing, or if they follow God?
Which, I mean, I don't see much harm coming from that in any way. I mean, even if it's not true that people won't go to heaven, I think there might be a waste of people's lives if they dedicate their whole lives and to just.
Do you believe that people? Do you believe that people's soul go to heaven when they die if they've acted in accordance with God?
Personally, I mean, from a scientific view, I like to think of the afterlife as,
I find it
get flooded with DMT at the end of our lives, and most people.
I find it very funny that
it feels like lasting for thousands of years. But
I feel like it's very funny that
that's
you'll make a very
view.
spiritual claim and then say scientifically speaking. Like, I don't think I don't know if science is following you. I don't think you can just say that it's scientific reasoning and then go on at something spiritual. But
okay, let me put it this way. In my point of view, the best future for religion to have, because you guys know that it's dang near impossible to convince a religious person that God doesn't exist, right? You guys deal with that all the time. But in my perspective, the best future for the world is if religion becomes scientific. And you guys might think that this is ridiculous.
I think this is
Christian I talk to.
I think this is a dichotomy that we can. You can't really bridge. I mean, you can apply some, like, religion can get some things right scientifically, but the reasoning behind religion and the reasoning behind science are different. And I don't know if they can really coexist without compromising.
I agree with that, but only because most religions try to go by dogmatic law, right?
Okay,
if we didn't
so
have
Chris,
dogmatic law, religion could change to become something where, okay, this is my perspective. Since if God created the universe, which is what most religious people believe, and science is the study of the universe, then science must be the study of God. And I believe
Chris,
the future of religion
Chris,
through scientific thought.
I want to kind of, I'm kind of going to go back to my question. I'm sorry, Ben, and I'm sorry, Chris, but I want to go back to my question because I asked it for a very, very important reason, because I'm trying to figure out where your head's at within things. So as a religious believer, you, not religion as a whole, but you personally, do you believe that our soul goes to heaven when we die?
I hope not, because my greatest fear is eternal life.
Do you believe that it does, though? That was the question. The question was, do you believe that it does?
I don't like to base what I think solely on belief, and you would have to in order to make a statement of whether or not that's true.
So then how are you religious?
So I don't know. I do not know. I consider myself to be a Christian because I follow the teachings of Jesus, the New Testament, the parables of Jesus. Don't harm your neighbor. Don't judge people. These types of things. And I mean, the Old Testament. Lots of Christians like to claim that it's real, but as far as Christianity goes, I mean, the Old Testament is clearly the covenant between God and the descendants of Abraham. If you're not a descendant of Abraham, it doesn't apply.
You can have those beliefs, though, that you want to better humanity and do all those things that, I mean, there are some teachings that Jesus had that were like legitimately moral things, but why would you, if you're saying that that's really the only reason that you're a Christian, then why wouldn't you just have those views as an atheist or as an agnostic or whatever you'd want to call yourself? Why do you need Christianity for that?
You 100% can, and that's the great thing about this. My whole idea is about.
So then why do you need? So then why do you need Christianity?
Religion.
Do you have other beliefs that
you don't need it at all? But are you going to be able to convince millions of Christians to not believe in God? I'm saying it's a better way to try to convince them to worship through science, right? Couldn't we have a great world if people stopped worshiping God by saying stupid prayers over and over again, and
I think
study real science and the universe?
Chris, I don't think that's the answer. I know I used to be very, very religious, fundamentalist, evangelical Christian, and I learned how to think about the world, and very quickly I figured out that religion wasn't the best way to think about it. Like, I could not use that thought process and get to religion.
I'm talking about religion being able to change. If we can change religion, it can be good for the world.
Chris, no, that's okay. There are certain Christians that I'd rather be friends with than certain atheists because of their ability to change their beliefs. But the problem is what we should do, instead of conceding that and just saying, well, we should just make religion better for everybody, how about we just teach people how to be skeptical and teach people how to use logic and how to think? And then, sure, yeah, we're not going to be able to convince every single religious person to leave religion, but we can, I think convincing people of a religion, even if you're just using it for political or moral agendas, is not the way to approach it. I think we approach the thought process, and then if people are going to, right?
I'm not really referring to convincing people to become religious. I'm referring to convincing people that are religious of a better way. Because you can't just tell
right, and you can do that without
you have to show them a better way.
You can do that without buying into the religion and without just
how is it
going with their religion?
If you do it with religion? How is it harmful if you do it with religion? You can,
because their religion still has harmful things in it. The religion still teaches very harmful practices.
The idea of dogmatic law goes out the window, right? You can't say that the harmful things in the Old Testament people will still believe.
But the foundation is built upon those harmful ideas. So even if, then you get to a point of what do we cherry pick to make religion better and evolve, but you're still stuck with the harmful fundamentals of those religions, when we could just take a secular approach and teach the way to think about how to treat people better. I see where you're going with this, and Chris, what it
of the New Testament,
Chris, what it sounds like. The New Testament says a lot of things about the role of women in society and the role of slaves in society. The New Testament is still very pro-slavery and very anti women's equality. So there are still plenty of harmful ideas. I think I wouldn't
say they were pro and anti these things. They talked about them as people could relate.
Oh no,
to
they had very distinct opinions.
Very pro-slavery and very, held women back a lot. But okay, look at it this way: if the New Testament came out and condemned these things that were at the time integral part of society, nobody would have ever listened to it or have read it. So,
but it's still wrong,
if the gospel
right?
is to be read by people.
But isn't the gospel supposed to tell people? Chris, you're talking over me, and I'm really, really angry about that. So I'm going to mute you. Isn't though, if you're going to have a book that's supposed to guide you to the right place and to be a moral person, shouldn't the ideal moral book tell you exactly what the right way to be moral is? And that book would not contain proper ways to own slaves or proper ways to tell women to submit and be quiet in churches, right? There are still problems, and you cannot get around these. Chris, I think you're heading in the right direction with the right thoughts. I think that you're on the right track, but I think you're holding on to this religion and wanting to give it a place in your thought process and in your life. And I'm hoping that you can kind of see the problems with that and find your way to not relying on this crutch. Because I think you can get there, but I don't know if you see kind of the contradictions here. I'm going to unmute you.
Well, I think that what you're saying is kind of, it's still based on the idea of dogmatic law. Like these things that are in the Bible, people need to go buy them for forever. But that is not even that. Okay, you know why Jesus spoke in parables?
Then why hold on to this book then? Why hold on to the religion at all? That's what I'm saying.
Well, Jesus spoke in parables, which are you can interpret them many different ways to be applied to the situation you're in, to be applied to the times. And that's why
if your instructional book is so all over the place that you can interpret it in any number of different ways, how is that useful? You can't end up at anything.
It is useful to the individual. It is useful to the individual to get them.
But why is it
about these things?
If they're taking something that's written down in a book, and it could be any book, it doesn't necessarily have to be the New Testament, and they're just reading whatever they want into it. Couldn't they do that from any book? Why is that book in particular necessary for that? I mean, why that and not the Quran or the Tipitaka? Or in fact, just get rid of all of those.
Aspect in it where okay, let's look at it this way: a lot more people read the Bible than have ever read the works of Marcus Aurelius, right? You might agree with that. But
can't you have community without religion? Like, we have an atheist community. Why?
You can, but it's not as guaranteed.
It's not in religion either. Its community is not guaranteed in religion either. In fact, like, a lot of us versus them rhetoric.
Yeah, I agree.
The big thing that's guaranteed, and I can't even say guaranteed, but more likely to happen is an us versus them mentality of these are my people, those are those people, and we're a community in the fact that we are exclusionary and are going to say, well, at least we're not these people over here. Why do we need
that ideology only came about in religion whenever
you're giving so many excuses.
Using religions.
Yeah, and Chris, if I may, if I may, you have demonstrated Ben's point yourself during this call, because you said specifically, well, that's the Old Testament. You know, why don't we just go by the New Testament? But some religious people, a lot of Christians, don't just go by the New Testament. The people who compiled and wrote the New Testament and worked out the theology didn't just go by the New Testament. In fact, that wasn't a thing. What they did was they went by the Old Testament. So you're actually demonstrating what Ben has said, that, you know, religious community isn't a guarantee, because religious community itself is divisive. And we can tell that because of the thousands and thousands of denominations that all believe different things. Well, even if we just take Orthodox Christianity and you have non-Orthodox Christians.
The polarity of religion is the only way it stops it from being tyrannical, right? If we had only one way of thinking...
No, sir, no. Let me stop you there. Right. I've just muted you because I feel it's important to stop you there and say that no, the divisiveness of religion has not stopped it being tyrannical. We've still got tyrannical aspects of religion. What it's done is it's allowed it to survive because it has adapted. That's what it has done. All these different aspects, all these different readings have allowed it to survive and go along with the time. So now we get Christians who say, oh, slavery, that was just a thing in the past. We don't do that anymore because it's not acceptable in society to have slavery. We have women bishops, which weren't allowed in the old days because it wasn't acceptable. It's that adaptation which has allowed it to adapt and survive. It's nothing to do with stopping tyranny. We still have aspects of religion that are tyrannical. It's not stopped that at all. I will unmute you. I'll let you respond to that point.
Talking about tyranny, I mean tyranny like ruling an entire country. One aspect of religion can't do that.
Of course it can.
How does one aspect of religion take over an entire country? Please give me an example.
Have you seen, I was going to, have you seen many Arab countries which are ruled by...
I've seen them, I mean, not personally, but... Yeah, well, those Arab countries you're talking about don't have a major polarity in their religions.
They do.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Have you heard of the Sunni and the Shia?
I mean, polarity is in many different religions, not just two warring factions. I mean,
they're not warring factions. It's a division that occurred right at the very beginning of Islam. And why is it during this call, whenever me or Ben have given you an example of anything at all, you have said, "Oh, I don't mean that. I mean this other thing." And you've kind of tried sidestepping the specific point.
Because you guys are misinterpreting what I'm saying, is what I'm saying.
You said different interpretations get rid of tyranny and religion. That's blatantly not true.
I said the polarity of religion, meaning having...
How is that different from the different interpretations? How is that different from different interpretations?
I mean, like many, many different ways, and every person interprets religion a different way. There's no one.
So how is it?
Christian
How is
out
that
there
different
has
from
the exact
polarity?
same
Then?
views as the next.
Yeah, that's how you
Exactly.
get
So people have
denominations.
different interpretations, which is apolarity, which is what we've just
Yes,
said.
and if we listen. What you're saying is that what I mean. You guys are stumping me a little bit. I'll admit that. But what I mean is that if we allow the polarity of religion, if all religious sects think that it's okay to have a different religion and a different way of thinking, that's what I mean.
But they're going to. And the fact that you've said, well, I think it should be this way, demonstrates that you are one of those people. You know, what's your solution? Telling everybody else they're not a true Christian and that they should all believe exactly as you do. Is that your solution?
No. Telling everyone that they worship the same God, but they just have a different way of doing it, which is necessary for different cultures.
That's not getting rid of a polarity, is it? That's not getting rid of different interpretations. That's just reinforcing it.
Not going to get anywhere, because with these different books and different interpretations, if you tell everybody that their God's the same, you're just having multiple different versions of that same God that contradict each other.
What I'm trying to do is look at God and get other people to view God and the worship of God through a scientific perspective where, essentially energy is God in this case.
Okay,
so you're just redefining God. Okay, so listen, Chris, I'm going to let you go. We've got a lot of callers on the line. Chris. I don't want to go down the line of the fact that you've just reinterpreted God, because that's a whole other rabbit hole that we could dive down. Give us a call back and, let's have that discussion in future about God being energy. And we'll have that discussion at another time. Thank you for your call. I'm going to let you go. I do appreciate your call, Chris. But we have got a lot of callers on the line, and we have got some things we need to get through it all. Yeah. We jumped around a little bit there, didn't we, Ben?
Oh yeah, no, but that was a fun call, and I know we're not going to get into as many calls today as we normally do, but I think the couple that we've had have been very, very exciting. So
it's quite frustrating as well, because we have more calls than we usually have, and we've had some really good first ones that have took us attention. Okay, so before we do anything else, I'm going to read out the top, or Ben is going to read out the top 5 patrons.
All right, here we go. The top 5 patrons of the week. Number 1, we have Dingleberry Jackson, Ayame, Oops, All Singularity, Devor Valgin, Kalevi Helveti, and an honorable mention to Icon Aclast.
Yeah, that's brilliant. We appreciate all of our patrons. It's great seeing the same names there. You can try and knock them off the top spot, by the way, if you want to, by becoming a patron. Okay, so we are going to talk about ways you can support Talk Heathen and the ACA before we jump into our next call. No, we're not. What we're going to do is talk about how you can support us. I'm reading the wrong notes. I'm going to get into trouble. Support us on Patreon and tiny.cc/PatreonTH. We've just been talking about that, and try and get yourself on that top 5 patron list. We now have a channel that houses all of the shows of the ACA in audio podcast form. You can visit tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. That's great fun. I'm over there quite a lot. You can become a part of the Talk Heathen community at our fan-run Facebook page at tiny.cc/FBTHG. And also, in case you didn't know, Talk Heathen has a TikTok channel, and we will be going live there before the shows on Sunday. So go and subscribe and join the pre-show on the Talk Heathen TikTok. We're going to jump straight into another call, Ben. Shall we take Christian? I'm fancying Christian. Let's jump into that.
Yeah.
That one's just popped up while I was reading those notes, and I thought, yes, we'll have that one. Christian, how are you?
I'm doing quite well, and I'm speaking to whom?
You're speaking to Richard and Ben.
All right, pleasure to meet you, Richard and Ben. So it may not surprise you, but I'm a Christian, shocker. And I'm a first-time caller, and I just had a simple question. Maybe we can branch off and other stuff, but I wanted to get a grasp on, you guys are obviously atheists. You've probably read the Bible. You don't believe the New Testament is correct, right?
Yep, pretty much.
All right. Right. Okay. So my question is, like, how did you deduce that? Like, what kind of standard did you apply to the, like, let's say the four Gospels, for example? Like, what standard of evidence did you kind of apply to the text to see if they're unreliable?
Okay, I'll let Ben go first because Ben is a former Christian. So I
I mean,
Awesome.
the big thing here too isn't. I think the way that you're approaching this question is as if we have the burden of proof to disprove the Gospels, but that's not how I look at it. I don't think that's the way Richard looks at it either. So we take the approach initially of, I don't accept it to be true, and what is the evidence that tells me that it is? Like, what improves my confidence level that what I'm reading is true? So I'm starting from a baseline of not believing. So I'm not taking a positive position and saying that I can absolutely disprove what's in the New Testament, but I am taking a position that I'm not convinced that it is true. And I'm not saying, like, when I say true or not, I mean like there's certain aspects within the Bible that probably are true. Like, there's probably true things mixed into it, but as a whole, I'm not convinced that the New Testament is the Word of God and that all of it happened and that it's inerrant. I don't accept those claims, but I am open. I am open to convincing evidence that would convince me that this is. And some things that really get me about the New Testament, especially the Gospels, my confidence is already shaken just by who wrote these Gospels, what time frame were they written. There's inconsistencies among them. What about that? The evidence that we have for the Gospels,
and when?
Yeah, they have not been. There's not good evidence saying that these were eyewitness accounts and that these were probably written much later than the actual time of Jesus. And so, looking at these Gospels,
can I stop you really quick? Can I stop you really quick? What?
Yeah.
To my understanding, most historians, as it were, would agree that it's like the latest Gospel of John is like 60 years after Christ died, but most of, let's say, Mark was written in 55. Acts was written in.
Mark was. Wait, hold on. Okay, let me stop you there. Where are you getting 55 from? Because most people who kind of study this would agree that Mark was written around 70, and that is the earliest of the four gospel accounts. So I'm interested where you're getting 55 from.
I thought Matthew was written in 70.
No, Matthew was written in a range. The widest range is 70 to 110, but most scholars think it was 80 to 90.
All right, I haven't heard that.
Mark was first written at 70. Luke and Matthew were based on Mark, scholars think. So that was the earliest, and most scholars think it was written around 70.
Well, let me backtrack really quickly because I don't want to get. I would like to talk about this, but my question is still like, so you're saying that you started off from the position that, correct me if I'm wrong, starting from a position that either you're not convinced that God exists, or is it the position that God's not real, and then you're going into it? Like, which is it that you're not convinced, or is it that you're taking the negative position?
I'm not convinced. I'm not taking the position that there is no God. I'm taking the position that I'm not convinced of one. But with regard to the New Testament, there is some evidence that make me less likely to take a positive position that it is the Word of God.
Okay, cool. So going back to my question, like what, so the standard that you went to kind of use to judge the reliability of the documents was dating, as you said. reliability of authorship, I guess. You're questioning who wrote them?
Oh yeah, I definitely question
Among
the
other things?
reliability of authorship of the entire Bible, even.
Fair enough. Well, why? What, like for the gospel specifically? What do you have a question about?
Well, we don't know who wrote them.
Like in terms of who wrote it.
Yeah, we don't really know.
Well, we
and
know Paul wrote most. Paul wrote like half of it.
Paul didn't. We don't know that Paul wrote the
know.
Gospels. The Gospels aren't attributed to Paul, but attributed to Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John.
No, I'm not talking about. No, I'm sorry. I'm not talking about the Gospels. I was talking about New Testament.
Paul, fair enough.
Not Acts, but Romans and the epistles. That's like half of the New Testament right there. And we know Paul of Tarsus probably did exist.
We know he existed, but a lot of things that he said, do we know, like his road to Damascus trip, do we know that actually happened?
Mm-hmm.
Or is that just like Paul on an acid trip? Like I have so many questions.
Well,
a lot of the New Testament relies on it's just assertions by Paul. Like if we're going to go with Paul's letters, a lot of what he says is just, how do we know any of that happened the way that he said it did? A lot of what he says happened without other people around. Like even when you have the New Testament, it's interesting. The New Testament, I hear this claim from Christians a lot, and I used to believe this, that the Bible was credible, and especially the New Testament was credible because of its reliance on eyewitnesses. But you look at the history of the New Testament,
that's part of it, yeah.
And there's actually not a lot of evidence of eyewitnesses to most of what happens in the New Testament. So that's kind of taken off the table.
Are you sure?
We don't have this. So what evidence do we have for these?
Why would you question that?
I would question the reliability of. Well, I would question your questioning of the reliability of the eyewitnesses. First of all, in terms of Paul of Tarsus, he didn't just have the encounter in Damascus and was like, oh my gosh, I'm a Christian, I'm going to preach. Like what he did first was he went to remember Stephen and James, and they talked for 13 days, and he interviewed them and I think a couple other people, then went to preaching. So he didn't just go willy-nilly, Yahoo.
Well, but couldn't I, if I had an acid trip and I said that I saw eyeballs on my ceiling and that like I went to heaven and came back and all this stuff, and like I knew I had an acid trip, like couldn't I tell if I saw Richard, be like, hey Richard, yeah, this thing happened, I'm absolutely convinced that this is real. And then if Richard was, had some reason to go along with it or thought I was serious, like there's things that can happen that aren't necessarily exactly the way that they parties.
What's that to do with anything?
That doesn't mean that
that's irrelevant.
That doesn't mean that it happened the way that Paul said it happened. Like, how many times have you listened to somebody tell a story about something that happened in their life and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, no, that sounds pretty legit. And then you talk to somebody else that like was in that encounter and they say, well, no, this part of the story is actually this way. This is actually what happened. Like, go to any like traffic accident scene and you'll get multiple different stories. And that's a very mundane event, right? Yeah. Like if somebody says, yeah, no, I was actually driving 20 miles an hour. Like I was being totally safe. And the other person says, no, actually this car came barreling at me at 75 miles an hour. And like people get things wrong, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And so merely somebody saying that this thing happened is not enough for me to be convinced. And that's what we see a lot. Like Paul says a thing and people believe the thing. It doesn't matter how many people believe the thing or how many times Paul has said it or to who he has said it. That does not tell me anything about its validity.
Fair enough. It would have to be, for me, how I see it is I would have to have sufficient reason to doubt it.
So why are let's address your approach there. I think Richard wants to jump in here because I'm confused personally by your well, I don't have enough reason to doubt it. Do you start off with the idea that everything is true? Sorry, I promise I'm going to let Richard take this over. But
no, I do not do that.
I've talked a lot. I'll let Richard take this part.
Okay, so on that point, following on from Ben's point, if you don't start off from the position of everything is true, what is it that convinces you that this particular thing is true?
So you're asking me what standard I approached the Gospels and the New Testament?
What convinces you that this is true?
Okay, yeah. No, that's a good question. Well, it's kind of I would say some kind of multitude of things. So, and this is to my understanding, I look into it a little bit. I'm a casual, but there is the fact that the idea that Jesus rose from the dead happened just about almost instantly after he died, which means that it's not like 2 generations removed and it's like some weird myth that's like long after everyone involved died. It's like, if you know anything about 1 Corinthians 15.
But okay, so let me stop you there. Because we're already disagreeing on that point. Because what evidence are you using to substantiate that point?
How do you mean?
What evidence would make you
specifically?
About Jesus' resurrection? What evidence substantiates that point for you that he was resurrected?
Oh, I didn't even
at all.
No, I got you. I didn't even get into that yet. I said what I said was there. I said after he died. I didn't even say after he resurrected. I said there has like almost immediately after he died, not died and resurrected. Almost immediately after he died, it was believed that he rose from the dead. And then I talked about
the rising from the dead is the resurrection. So what is it that makes you think that occurred, that we have testimony or that we have evidence that occurred as soon as he died?
Well, I guess I'll continue with talking about the standard then, because that will answer that question. So what convinced me that Jesus rose from the dead was seeing how early the idea that he did rise sprung up, number one. Number two, I believe that the eyewitnesses are reliable it's kind of twofold, because there are a lot of unintentional harmonizations and kind of filled in blanks that one gospel may not write.
Okay, let's stop. Let's stop on there. I'm not interrupting you. I promise. I'm going to let you speak on those two things. I just don't want to get too far in front of ourselves. So on the idea that we have evidence that from pretty much the time that it occurred, when is the earliest evidence we have that Jesus died and rose from the dead? That Jesus died and rose from the dead. What is the earliest evidence that we have?
Let me clarify. The earliest, you're asking the earliest evidence that he rose from the dead, or the earliest evidence that people believed he rose from the dead? Because I can answer the second one pretty easily.
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's the same thing, isn't it? Unless you see a difference between those things.
Well, I'm saying just because people believed it doesn't mean, like, I'm not even touching yet, like, whether he did or not. I'm just
okay. Sorry, yeah, I misspoke. Sorry, I misspoke there. Yeah, I understand now. Yeah. Okay, so we're going on. We're going on the belief that people had that he rose from the dead. Fair enough. Yeah. Sorry, my fault.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, yeah, you're good. So I heard, and I looked into it a little bit, like the Apostolic Creed, 1 Corinthians 15. I don't remember the exact quote, but it's like Jesus, lived, died, and rose again according to scriptures, and rose on the third day according to scriptures, whatever. I have a Bible next to me, but I don't need to open it. It's very simple. And so why people like, I forgot who exactly says it, but why some scholars believe that it's really recent after Christ died was because Paul said, he's talking to the Corinthian church. It's his first letter to the Corinthian church, 1 Corinthians. And that was, I think like 60 AD. But he said in the letter to the Corinthians that he got it beforehand, which is before 60 AD. And the people that he got it from,
that still leaves a period of 30 years. That's still, I mean, the dates I have for that for 1 Corinthians 15 are actually 53 to 55. So let's go with mine, which is actually better for you. That's still 23 years after the death of Jesus. So Paul heard this at some point in the interim period of 23 years, but we don't know which point. We just know that there was.
I believe that we do. I need to. I think the person was Gary Habermas, actually, but he had made several lectures about this. I don't remember it completely, but he has a good chain of inferences to strongly infer that 1 Corinthians 15, the Apostolic Creed, was within 1 year of Christ.
I've never heard that date given. I have never heard that date given.
Well then, yeah. I mean, I would check out Gary Habermas.
I mean, that seems very liberal date given for that event. I certainly would agree with you that the creed was present when Paul wrote 1 Corinthians 15 because he addresses it. But I'm not sure where the date from 1 year comes from. So let's kind of move on from that and go to the eyewitness accounts then, because we kind of agree on that. I mean, I wouldn't agree on but we both agree that Paul wrote 1 Corinthians 15 and it was based on an earlier creed. But let's move on to what you think is convincing about the eyewitness accounts.
All right. So I believe that the eyewitness accounts are reliable because, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but one reason is definitely the criterion of embarrassment. I'm sure you've heard that.
Oh, sorry, say that again.
Criterion of embarrassment. Have you heard that before?
Of embarrassment? I'm not sure if I'm hearing you correctly.
Criterion of embarrassment.
Okay, go on. So talk me through that one.
Yeah, so the criterion of embarrassment is one kind of tool, so to speak, that historiographers use to determine how valid a text may be. It's not like a totally jumped conclusion, but basically the premise is like if an account that claims to be historical includes aspects of a narrative that are like inconvenient or embarrassing to the characters involved, then it leads credence to the fact that it's trying to stay as a true to life kind of depiction of the events.
Why?
So an example of that in the New Testament, like in the Gospel specifically, would be, I could cite a few. Like, Richard, I don't know when was the last time you read the Bible, but in the Gospels, kind of ubiquitously, like basically all of the disciples were like complete idiots until after Jesus rose from the dead. And like,
I'm not sure where you're getting that from, but go on.
I'll explain that later. I'm being funny. I'm being funny, but basically, like until after Jesus rose from the dead, like the disciples had no idea what Jesus was talking about. They were like, "Is he really God, or like is he like kind of is he some other messianic kind of prophet, or like what? What's going on?" And then
where you're coming from.
It was after, then it was after Christ rose and they saw him. They were like, "Oh, you are God! Wow!" And then even Thomas was like, "Oh, I still don't believe." And then he believed later. But another example would be.
So why should we believe that claim? Why should we believe that particular claim that they didn't know that he was God until after that? Because don't forget, these eyewitness accounts we have in the Gospels are the very things that this thing is written in. So what do we have to suggest that is true in of itself?
Well, it's not to say that it's true. Like I said earlier, like it's a way that you can infer that.
Okay. Again, I apologize for that. That's my wording, which is not very good. Go on.
No, you're all good. Another example of the criterion of embarrassment would be like, I would say one of the first chapters of the book of Mark, where like I think it was like Mark 3 or whatever, where Jesus' brother James And the rest of his family too. They thought that he was like insane, like, and they were trying to drag him back home, you know, instead of preaching, because they thought that he was just a kook, you know, just being insane.
Again, but these, okay, let me stop you there, because
Like
both of these examples you're giving me from within the Gospels. And the kind of thing we're trying to get to is why the eyewitness testimony itself is useful, and the eyewitness testimony is all the Gospels. So you kind of,
I mean,
it's kind of evidencing itself. It's not, it's internal consistency isn't like an external criteria we can use to verify it, is it? We could go to the Quran and we could do exactly the same thing. We could go to the Tipitaka in Buddhism, or the Vedas in Hinduism, and do the same thing. So how do we get in it? Because you said you were convinced by the New Testament, by the Gospel accounts. So what is it externally that convinces you about them? The internal consistency can't be used as a good measure to explain why you were convinced that they were true in and of themselves, because otherwise you'd also believe the Quran, or you'd believe the Vedas, or you'd believe Harry Potter was true, or the Lord of the Rings.
Well, I'd have to give more reasons to my standard then. But as I said the first time, like the criterion of embarrassment is like, it's not because they're embarrassing stories that it's true. Like I never said that. I said that it's a way that you can infer that the account is probably more true to life than it would be otherwise, because they're not trying to like glam it up, so to speak, and be like, oh, they're trying to cover their tracks, you know.
But along with that, like, couldn't if you were planning to write a story that you wanted to use to convince people, like, isn't that a literary tactic that people would know about? Like,
this is the point I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I apologize, Richard. I didn't get that.
This comes under internal consistency. Just because it's internally consistent, it's not
really quick, Ben. I would question that, because one, the purpose, if like, let's say if me, Christian, like if I'm trying to start a new religion, I want it to be successful. So having embarrassing stories like women finding the tomb or whatever, empty, blah, blah, that would lower my reputation. And that actually was something that people, you know, in the 1st and 2nd century who were against the church, that's something that they attacked. Like, oh, women found the tomb first? Oh, it must not be true. You know, it's like that. It would lower my reputation to deliberately make my written in situation less credible, quote unquote.
But does that make
and also,
it
second,
true,
that would imply.
though?
Well, really quickly, the second part to that is like that would also imply that like, let's say Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the rest of the 12, that would also imply that they had something to gain by recording the New Testament, which, I mean, I highly doubt.
It could,
but we don't know they wrote the
don't...
things. That comes back to that. We don't know that they wrote the things, and we're talking about the kind of that particular idea. We've got a story in the Buddhist scriptures where Devadatta is going around talking about is causing a schism in what's called the Sangha, which is a Buddhist community, and that has the same kind of thing where if they were trying to convince people that was true, they wouldn't do that because it kind of shows that it's, you know, that there's a division there, and you don't want to do that if you want to convince people it's true. You want to talk about a strong combined community, yet they openly reported this schism within the community that Devadatta was trying to start. So that in itself doesn't show that Christianity is true, because like I said, we find these things in other religious disciplines as well. So we can kind of, as a standalone piece of evidence, we can throw that one away. It's not, it doesn't show that Christianity is unique, having that criteria.
Well, it's not about, I would watch the language about throwing it away. It's not like, I'm not saying you should throw it away, and I'm not saying the other extreme, like, oh, just believe it just because of that. I'm saying it's a cumulative case, like these compounding factors.
But as part of the cumulative case, we should throw it away because it doesn't show that Christianity is true. It's because we've got examples of it in other religions. So we can say, well, that's not very good to form a cumulative case that Christianity is true, because this one particular piece of evidence we know exists in other religions. So let's say, okay, maybe throw it away might be a bit strong. Let's set that thing aside, because we're not saying it's not there. So let's just set that aside as part and move that from the cumulative case. That's no longer part of the cumulative case.
Let me posit this. Instead of saying let's set it aside, let's say let's keep them both on the table and let's test it with the higher standard, right? Which is what I'm going to get into next. So,
okay, go on.
Yeah.
You know, as I said earlier, like and I'm pretty sure that most historians believe that John the Baptist existed in some form or another. Not that John wrote the book of John, but like whoever the 12 were, whoever wrote the New Testament. I mean, I know they had nothing to gain because they, died and were persecuted. And they wrote with they wrote with the. I believe that they wrote with the intention.
That's a whole argument that we can go down a whole tangent of that, but like the whole they had nothing to gain because they were persecuted and died is not a good argument, because I know we go through this frequently, but think about people in Islam. Do you think people in Islam who die for their belief, if they actually believe what they're doing, do you think that Islam is true because those people died for their beliefs?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, I get that. That's kind of a
so it's not a good argument to use.
Well, I would say it's not. I would say that line of thinking is kind of a little bit fallacious, because it's remember, the New Testament writers, they're in the first century as these events happen. So it's the people around, the communities around them would have known if it's a lie. They would have known if it's a lie. And
but there were people in Islam who we're not just talking about the 9/11 bombers. There were people in Islam who Muhammad is said to have either been involved in or commanded altogether cumulatively 100 battles. So there were people who died in early Islam for what they were believed in. There were people who died in the Buddhist scriptures, and I'm using these three religions on purpose, so we've got more than one kind of case to go out. So because of what they believed in, so we've got three religions, and the first three criteria you have given for for believing the gospel accounts as true are present in all three of those religions, in the earliest forms of those religions. So we've kind of this is what I'm saying about. I'm not trying to. I'm just aware we've got time constraints, and I'm trying to get through to see if we've got a particular thing where we've got some meat to the bones, where we can say, yeah, that's something exclusive to Christianity. You find that convincing. Let's call back on another day and get into the nitty gritty of that thing. You've already given two different things that are example within three different religions.
Sure, yeah. And then this would, so again, instead of setting everything aside, let's keep them all on the table and let's test with a higher standard. So another thing that I use to deduce that the New Testament, specifically the Gospels, were, at least somewhat credible, was historical accuracy, which would point to the fact that they were written when they alleged to have been written, where they alleged to have been written, dates, time,
but does that
political figures, things like that.
But so does every text that is written at a certain time frame that we can verify to be written at the time frame, does that mean that it's true?
No, I'm not saying that any of these make it true. I'm saying it's a cumulative case. It leads to
so it's not a good let's just go just bring us the arguments that convince you that it's true. I get that you're going for this cumulative case thing, but if each point,
which is what how I used to believe that it was true.
Each point is not
convincing thing, unfortunately.
Each of these points is not convincing. So why are you
not exclusive to Christianity? Again, we've got examples in the Quran of real places and real events that we know occurred.
Well, with the Quran, I've read the Quran, and I don't think it holds up to historical scrutiny. Actually, I can give you an example.
Neither does the Bible.
So this is the thing. The criteria you're giving for the Gospels standing up to historical scrutiny are the same criteria that is in the Quran. So why are you saying that doesn't? And this is when the only yardstick we've been using so far actually gives equal merit to both of them. You've given three sets of criteria which all stand.
No, well, I would doubt that conclusion because in the Quran, for example, it makes like, let's say it's talking about geography, right? Like it talks about the Valley of Mecca or whatever. You know, it mentions having olive trees. Mecca doesn't have olive trees; it's too dry. What it's probably talking about is Petra, you know, in North Africa, right? That's a historical anachronism that you can falsify easily, which takes away credibility from the Quran. With the Bible, for example, like you can, like I'm thinking right now.
I find it interesting that you're pointing out specific flaws with the Quran and then only pointing out what you believe to be accuracies in the Bible. Like, I think, how about, can you apply the same level of scrutiny to the Bible that you're also applying to the Quran?
Well, I hope that I'm not coming across like I'm trying to be biased.
It does come across that way because what you're doing is you're making all these reasons to hold on to this one book that you want to hold on to. Meanwhile, you're using a separate standard to judge the other books, and that's why we're saying like your evidence that you're coming to the table with.
Would it be fair, Christian?
Yeah,
sorry, Ben. Would it be fair, Christian? Would it be fair to say in all three of these traditions we have some things we know that happened, like we do in the Bible, and some things we cannot find evidence for happening because we've got evidence, we've got negative evidence, archaeological that word evidence in the Bible where we expect to find things in a certain layer according to the Bible, and it's not there. There's lots of work being done on this. I don't know off the top of my head, but you can go and have a look in. There's lots of Old Testament scholarship. I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head. I really like biblical
archaeology, so I'm very interested in that topic. But going back, I kind of want to reconcile this this quandary kind of going on, Dan. It's like I'm not treating it with. I really hope I'm not coming across like I'm treating the Bible with a different standard. It's like I'm citing an example of how I applied the level of scrutiny and talking about like archaeology and geology to the Quran.
Yeah, I get that you're trying not to come across as. I get that you're trying not to come across as having that bias, but you are unintentionally applying that bias. Like you've approached the Quran
about like the
way that you are approaching the Quran, you should also approach the Bible, and that's what Richard and I aim to do. Like that's why we're starting from a level of not believing in either of them, and there has to be, like Richard is saying, there has to be something within your case for Christianity that is going to push us over into believing that. But you're starting from a place of believing in Christianity, and you've basically said, well, I don't have enough to convince me it's not true. Meanwhile, you're applying the same skepticism that Richard and I have for Islam.
That way.
No, but that's what you're doing. Okay, like I don't know if you don't.
The issue is. Hold on, really quick. I want to clear this up because I don't want you to think that I'm some type of weirdo. I think we're having something very lovely. Dan.
We don't think you're weird. Look, we're having a good conversation. We don't think you're weird at all.
We don't think you're a weirdo, but it's just there's an internal bias that we all have, and like I do with certain things, and I have to have people remind me, like, hey, no, your argument is not.
Oh yeah, no doubt. No, I get that. I get that.
All of us have to have that,
really quick.
And we're not aware of how we think sometimes. And I'm just trying to let you know, like this is the argument that you're making. This is what you're saying. And if it's not intentional, maybe you need to go back and reevaluate your argument and say, okay, maybe I need to rethink my position. And that's all we're trying to say is I think you need to rethink your position.
I get that. No, I get that. I appreciate that. What I'm saying is I think you're a little bit hung up on like, I have no reason to believe it's not true. That's not how I started off as. At first, I didn't believe this stuff, and I just looked into it, and I just came to that conclusion. That's how I feel now with the amount of evidence that I've come to, that I've seen. But when I started looking into the Bible, I started from a position like you of I'm neutral, I'm agnostic to it, I have to go where the evidence takes me. I didn't start.
If that's the case, then Christian, if that's the case, and I don't
begging
doubt
the question of like, oh, I believe it's true, therefore the New Testament is true.
If that's the case, why with the first 3 sets of criteria you've given us, why are they present in other religions as well? Because if you're coming from a truly impartial point of view, you must say, well, there are some true things and false things in the Bible. There are in the Quran and the Tipitaka. People died for what they believe in. People did in the Quran and the Tipitaka. And what was the first one? I can't remember what the first one was because we've been talking for that long. But whichever that one was, also present in the Quran and Tipitaka. So we've taken only 3 religions, and there are more than 3. And I would hazard a guess that those criteria would be present in a wider selection as well. But we've taken only 3 religions. You've given us 3 sets of criteria, which you said convince you that Christianity is true. And yet those 3 things are present in those other religions as well. So which one, when are we going to get to one that isn't present in the other religions?
I just gave you, oh man, Richard, like I just mentioned earlier, like 5 minutes ago, I didn't even get to how I applied the historical standards for the Bible. I mean, I will maybe someday, but it's talking
that might be a different call.
The Quran, it'll have to be. I'm sorry, but I gave one example. I could give more like archaeological examples.
You gave an example of something that isn't real.
Really quickly? Could I finish really quickly? Yeah, like I gave one example of how archaeological scrutiny doesn't hold up to the Quran narrative. Not because I'm biased or anything, but it's how it is.
To some of the Quran narrative, there are some true things and some false things in the Quran. The same is in the Bible. There is a book called The Bible Unearthed by Israel Finkelstein and someone else. There's Dr. Joshua Bowen's handbook, Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament. Both of these books go into the archaeological record and show the stories in the Bible, the archaeology does not confirm them. And in some cases, there is negative evidence for them. Now, as I said, I can't remember specific examples, but if you have a look into those books, which are really, really interesting books, and I'm sure there are many scholarship books of scholarship on the subject which do the same. They will show you that some things in the Bible are true, and some places are real, and some we have no evidence for, just like the example you gave in the Quran. So again, we've got the same criteria over the same religions.
That was just one example, though, but okay. Yeah, and again, I just gave one example. It's like, you can't prove the creation account to be true or whatever. It's like, it's poetry. We get it, But going back to the second criterion that I gave, talking about like the presidency of the eyewitnesses and the parties involved, whatever, not to pick on the Quran, but this is the other book I've read the most. With the Quran, the whole Uthmanic revision, the Battle of Yamama, the Quran literally means recitation. It wasn't written down until like decades and decades, and the version that we have now.
Exactly the same as the New Testament. You mean exactly the same as the Bible?
Well, that one specific part, yeah. But as I was about to say, as I was finishing, do you know what the Uthmanic revision is?
Yes, it's when the Caliph Uthman got rid of the earliest copies of the Quran and
yes, exactly,
put his favorite versions in. Yeah. Just for reference, and by the way,
after that, but
my degree is in religious studies, religion, philosophy, and ethics. So I do study this stuff on a daily basis. So just for reference, just so I'm not just plucking religions. Cool. When I talk about Islam and Buddhism, I'm doing it because I have a reasonable understanding of those religions, so I can talk on them in at least as much kind of depth as I can about Christianity as well. So I'm not just kind of pulling stuff out my ass to throw at you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I didn't think you were, Richard, but I have that. When I talk about this with some people, I ask them, and they're like, "No, it's all." I have to brief, but it's like with the Uthmanic revision, or whatever. In the case of the Bible or whatever, the that, you know, something to that extent has yet to happen. And there's a
I
chain
fail
of
to
custody
understand what you
that
mean.
you can follow.
I mean, there were I mean, even the
Mhm.
compilation of the New Testament took throwing lots and lots of books out and deciding which ones fit the Orthodox theology, which in the early years was wildly different. There were wildly
there are
different
more criteria
ideas.
than that. Well, there are more criteria involved in that. Like one, like, and I'm sure you know this, so I'm not saying anything new to you, but you know, there are stipulations involved to determine like whether a book was canon. Like, was it written by an apostle or an eyewitness? You know, was it accepted by the Orthodox community, as you just mentioned? Was it?
Yes, but this criteria was developed by the people compiling it. The criteria was developed by the people compiling it and arguing the theology. This is a problem when it's essentially a case of the winners writing history. So we can say, yes, there's a criteria that shows this, and this, but that criteria was developed by the people who actually won the arguments. If we went, for example, about the criteria from the Gnostics, if we take the Gnostics' idea of the kind of the heavens being spheres and each star being contained within its own sphere and things like that, and they'd have won the argument, we'd have had a completely different set of criteria. But they didn't win the argument. The people who won the argument and wrote the criteria that we have to judge it by. Can you not see how this is a problem?
Well, the way you put it, yeah, but there's more information than that, right? So it's like, it's not just like, you know, it wasn't just.
Why are you granting all of these extra steps for the Bible and you're not granting that for the other religions? Like there's definitely applying different standards for the Bible than you are for the other religions we mentioned. Like, do you not see the problem with how you're thinking about it?
Well, I was about to make a comparison between the Quran and the Bible.
See, you seem totally willing to dunk on the Quran, and then like as soon as we bring up exception, like, or we bring up arguments against the Bible, and your response is, oh, well, but that's not everything. There's more context and all this stuff. But like, we could do the same. Like Richard and I could take the position.
I mean, that's just how it is.
Yeah, no, but hold on. But Richard and I could take the position of Islam and make the same statements and saying like, oh, hold on, but you're looking at it from this lens and you're not looking at these other contexts. You're not we can do the same arguments. And I'm kind of stumped by the fact that you apparently can't see how you're doing the same thing.
The problem, I'm unfortunately not being able to finish most of my sentences, Dan. So I'm trying to get there. I appreciate the concern, and I know what you mean. I get it. I'm trying to look at it from as unbiased as possible. So just bear with me.
Right, but here's the thing though.
I'm sure
you keep saying over and over again. You keep saying over and over again that you're trying to be as unbiased as possible, and then we point out an area of your bias, and you ignore that, and you don't change your position, and that's a problem. Right. Well, so if you have an area where you're being biased, if you're trying not to be biased and you're called out on your bias, the honest thing to do is to reevaluate your position. Right. And I'm not seeing that happen.
Or I can give more context that supports why I came to the conclusion I did.
Yeah, but you haven't done that. Every piece of evidence you keep bringing, we keep mentioning about why that's not sufficient.
But then the problem is I keep trying to give extra context, and then I get cut off, and then I'm like, oh, and then you're saying, oh, I'm being biased, and I haven't even given more context that supports why I believe what I do. So it's like, I'm trying to work with you, Dan, and I like you, but we gotta, I haven't even gotten most of what I want to say out.
Yeah, I think maybe we need to continue this call on a different time, because I think we've gone in a lot of different circles.
And we are way over time,
I'd
and
love to
there
talk
is
to you
someone
again.
else I want to get to before really quickly.
Yeah.
Listen,
Yeah, we're good.
Christian, honestly, this has been a brilliant conversation. I do want to continue this conversation with you. I really, really do. And I thank you for your cordiality. You've been, it's been a good conversation. There's been no shouting, no raving at each other. It's been all very good with,
I don't do that type of stuff, man.
Good.
I don't need to do that
and
stuff.
neither do we if we can help it. So yeah, it's been a great call. I'm going to let you go, but please do call back and let's continue.
All right, appreciate it, guys.
I really enjoyed that, Ben. I want to go. I'm going to go and pick this last call up because it is somebody who wants to call me out or wants me to clarify something. So I'm kind of want to address this just quickly before we go. And I'm talking to Jim from Ohio. Are you there, Jim?
Hi. Yeah. Hi. By the way, I'm not calling you out on this or anything like this. I'm not a Buddhist or a Buddhist student, so I've got no claim for it. But on another episode, March 12th, the subject was gravity does not exist. And the caller, by the way, I'm an atheist. I think he was from Hawaii. And he said basically at the beginning there's two choices. If you're religious, God did it. If you're a scientist, then there's material, natural. First of all, there's a third choice. There's a scientist who do still believe in God. The evolution thinks that's just part of God's design. But what I really want to address to was that in your example, you say there are religions that don't believe in God, and you mentioned Buddhism. And I understand that religion doesn't believe in God. Buddha, I guess, didn't claim that he was divine or anything like that. But it was mostly about, I think, and I don't know too much about this, I can't even quote anything he said, but I think his stance was more on, how morality and life, what's the meaning of life, how should we live our life. So my question is, wouldn't that make Buddhism more of a philosophy than a religion? Isn't religion by definition a belief in one or more deities?
No, okay, so I think, I mean, I can't, without looking, I can't talk on the specific call you were referring to. It's very unlikely, I said without any clarification, that there aren't gods in Buddhism. I may have said there is no creator God in Buddhism like there is in the Abrahamic religions. Because one thing I most argue with people about is Buddhists who say there are no supernatural beings or gods in Buddhism, because there are. There just aren't creator gods in Buddhism. Now, there are some schools of Buddhism that don't believe in any gods whatsoever, or are completely atheistic, and that's fair enough. But in the scriptures, there are most certainly gods and supernatural beings. So if I absolutely said there are no gods whatsoever in Buddhism, which I find very difficult to believe, I misspoke, and I apologize for that. But without listening to the particular call, I can't remember exactly what I said.
If you want to check this March 12th of this year, I may have just called you, but I just wondered about that. Before I let you go, do I have time to ask one question? One of your callers referred to a book by Stephen Hawking. Do you remember what that was?
I don't think, did he mention a book, Ben? I don't know if the caller mentioned a specific book.
There's one of the earlier callers mentioned Stephen Hawking.
I know he mentioned Stephen Hawking, but I'm not sure if he mentioned a specific book. They just mentioned Stephen Hawking's position. I don't know. Maybe the audience can help out. I don't remember.
Yeah, you can go back and rewatch this later and find out what was specifically mentioned.
Okay. Well, thank you.
No problem. I just want to thank you for calling in, and I always appreciate being challenged if I've said something that that might not be true, or if I've got wrong. Absolutely. I welcome those calls, and I really wanted to kind of got that. We will be joining us. I think we will be joining the Discord if you're still up for it, Ben. I know we've massively overrun, but that's okay. We can do that. Let's get the notes up. If you happen to be in the Austin area this week on June 25th, 2023, then please consider joining us for the live broadcast of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience. Talk Heathen will be hosted by Objectively Dan and Jamie The Blind Limey. And the Atheist Experience will be hosted by Christy Powell and Jimmy Jr. Doors open at noon, and we hope to see you there. Oh, they're all fantastic hosts. You can... have you ever, I know I have you ever said, I really love the content of the ACA creates, but I wish there was a way I could get it all the time. There is. We've got you covered. We now have 24/7 live stream. AXP TV delivers a constant stream of shows, clips, and specials from the 26 seasons of the Atheist Experience. And now AEN TV provides you with clips from the other shows of the Atheist Experience networks like Talk Heathen, Truth Wanted, and Secular Sexuality. Just to name a few, you can watch or simply listen to your favorite hosts and discover some hosts you've never heard of at tiny.cc/AXTP-TV and the tiny.cc/AEN-TV to join the fun. And as I said earlier, I do nip into those and watch those quite regularly. And the prompt for this week, for the question for next week, is what would you have ordered at the Last Supper and why? Reply in the comments and tune in at the beginning of the next week's episode to hear the top 3 answers. There are lots of ways to support the ACA. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, become a member, click the join button below the video, support us on Patreon at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. We now have a channel that houses all of the ACA in audio podcast form. Visit tiny.cc/AEN podcasts, and you can become part of the Talk Heathen community in our fan room Facebook page at tiny.cc/FBTHG. If you'd like to continue the discussion after the show, we will be in Discord, myself and Ben, and that's at our fan run Discord server at tiny.cc/ACD Discord. And of course, me and Ben have been talking all day, but we couldn't do this on our own. We've got lots of lovely people who do this with us and help us and get us off the ground, and that is the crew. Let's have a look at the lovely crew, because they are brilliant, and it's them who do all the hard work. Look at them looking really angry because we've gone so over time. It doesn't matter. We've had fun. It doesn't matter. Okay, so let's send some love rings out. We're going to say, whether you believe or not, if you're an essential worker, we want to thank you. You know, I'm an essential worker. I've been there. I know what it's like. I extend gratitude to everybody else who's been in the position. I know Ben's an essential worker. If you don't believe, this is your community. You know, we have those groups which we've mentioned, the Facebook, the Discord, we've got the TikTok. You can connect with us there. We absolutely appreciate it. And if you do believe, we don't hate you.
We're just not convinced.
See you next time, guys. Thank you very much.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.